Hello guys, what is up? ImCameo, and today we're going to be going over the 5 PC upgrades that you need to make and when to make them. Let's get into this. So we all got our stimulus check, you blew it on a new gaming PC, whether it was pre-built or you built your own, and now you're getting your unemployment checks, which are paying more than your actual job was, so you have some extra disposable income and you're looking to upgrade your PC just a little bit more. Only Americans in 2020 are going to get this. Jokes aside though, this is the order I would upgrade the components in my PC and the way you should too. It's pretty easy. These components are pretty easy to upgrade as well. So even if you didn't build your own PC, this should be pretty simple for you. So number one, the first thing you should be upgrading on your PC is getting a solid state drive. Now, if your computer doesn't have one at all, you can pick up a pretty small SSD for 40 or 50 bucks, maybe even cheaper now, with like 120 to 240 gigabytes of storage space, and make that your boot drive. And that's on its own going to make a huge difference. Now, the solid state drive doesn't have any moving components compared to your normal hard drive, so it's going to be a whole lot faster because it's using flash memory instead of the spinning mechanical disk. And by simply adding a small SSD and putting your Windows on it along with any essential programs, your boot time is going to be a whole lot faster. Windows is just going to operate faster. Any of those essential programs are going to boot and operate faster. Overall, getting an SSD is the number one upgrade you should be doing, and the first thing you should be doing to make your PC perform that much better. Okay, now a lot of PCs now either come with an SSD or come with a small SSD as the boot drive. Either way, the first thing you should be doing is replacing that mechanical drive with an SSD. SSD prices have come down so much in the last couple of years that you can get a 1 terabyte SSD for like 150 bucks, sometimes even cheaper on sale. So you should really look into getting an SSD for all of your files or most of your files. If you still have a lot of data storage needs, let's say you're storing a lot of video, having a mechanical drive just makes sense. However, for things like games, applications, just your normal like documents and everything else, if you can get as much of that onto SSDs as possible, you're gonna have so much better performance. I actually did this with my own PC that I built 4 or 5 years ago, and I added a Samsung 860 EVO 1 terabyte SSD into this PC along with my boot drive that was already in there. So now about half of my storage is SSD, and then I still have the mechanical drive that was in there originally, just storing like video files and stream VODs and that kind of stuff. Just stuff that is going to fill up a 1 terabyte SSD pretty quickly. So having that extra space is very beneficial to have. So yeah, overall, number one, get an SSD, upgrade your SSD, get a bigger capacity SSD. Overall, more SSD, the better in your computer. So I'll link some SSDs down in the description down below, along with some other parts that I would suggest for upgrades. So check those out if you need them. Let's move on to number two. So the number 2 upgrade you should be making is purchasing a full Windows key if you haven't already. If you bought a pre-built, this doesn't really apply to you. Even people who built their own PC, this might not apply to you. If you didn't know, you can install Windows and not activate it, and it'll essentially leave a little watermark in the bottom of your screen. Now, you should upgrade to the full version of Windows for a few reasons. First off, you're using the software you should pay for, and it's not that expensive. You can get an OEM key online for 30 bucks or less, even if you check places like eBay, G2A, Kinguin. Again, links will be in the description for those. But also, by activating your Windows key, you're getting a lot of other features that you might find beneficial. So Windows Defender, which is the built-in kind of antivirus, anti-malware system. You have Windows Hello, so you can use your webcam to unlock your computer. You have dark mode, you're missing key feature updates. There's also issues installing Office if your computer is not actually activated. Now for gamers, that's usually not a huge deal, but you should still activate it. You should still activate it before anything else, actually after the SSD, and kind of works alongside it. If you buy a new SSD and you haven't activated your Windows key yet, maybe do that at the same time. Again, Windows keys are not that expensive. You're gonna have to reinstall Windows anyway. You might as well take care of it all at once and get that done. Now, like I said, most of you probably already have this. If you bought a pre-built, your computer is almost positively activated already. If you build it yourself, you probably already bought one, but I know for a lot of people who are gamers, it's really easy to just not activate it and not even think about it, not even consider that you actually need to purchase an activation key. So do that if you haven't already. Seems like common sense, but I've seen a lot of people who haven't activated their Windows yet, and they just deal with a little watermark in the bottom, but you're missing a lot of other features too that you could be taking advantage of. So just activate it. Just activate it. You're using the software. Just activate it. Now moving on to number 3, 4, and 5. Once you have an SSD, once you have a solid SSD, a solid amount of SSD storage on your computer, and make sure your Windows is activated. The next three things kind of depend on what your computer has. Now, the first thing I'll look at is your RAM. This is your random access memory. This is where programs are basically stored while they're open. You should be around 16 gigabytes of RAM nowadays. A lot of games, a lot of programs use a lot of RAM. Google Chrome uses a ton of RAM. And if you notice some slowdowns while you're multitasking, or something's just freezing up, maybe some dropped frames in game, some stuttering, this could be because you don't have enough RAM on your computer. A couple years ago, 8 gigabytes of RAM was solid. You really didn't need a whole lot more unless you were doing some heavy multitasking or some video editing or that kind of stuff. But nowadays, you really want to be pushing towards 16 or more because programs have gotten bigger, they've gotten more complex, and they just take up more RAM when they're open. So that's the first thing you should look at. If you have 8 gigs of RAM, get 16. You can just get another stick of 8 or another 2 sticks of 4, assuming your motherboard has room for it. Just take a look at your motherboard. So your RAM are the other little sticks. If there's more DIMM slots right next to it, you should be able to add more. Try to buy the same brand. It just makes everything easier. Yeah, you can have different types of brand with different speeds, whatever. Just if you can match them, it's just so much easier, especially if you don't know a whole lot about computers. They're really easy to upgrade. You just put the stick in and that's it. So look into upgrading your RAM if you don't have 16 gigabytes already. However, if you do have 16 gigabytes, this is where it gets kind of iffy. So what I would recommend in terms of upgrades is you should open Task Manager and then go about your normal PC needs, whether it's gaming, whether it's web browsing. If you have multiple monitors especially, just keep that Task Manager in the bottom corner of one of your monitors that you're not really using that space for, and just monitor what's going on. When you're experiencing any slowdowns, any stuttering, if you're not really experiencing any of that, you probably don't need to upgrade your computer unless you're looking to up your resolution or get more performance. But if you're not experiencing any issues, you can really just do whatever you want. That being said though, if you're seeing that your RAM is, peaking towards like, high 80s, 90%, sometimes hitting 100, and then you do get some kind of slowdowns, I would look into adding more RAM. Even if you have 16 gigs, go for 24, 32, get more RAM. That way you don't have that problem. That being said though, if you open Task Manager and you're monitoring and your RAM's doing fine, but maybe your GPU is maxing out with whatever you're doing, that's the next thing you should be upgrading. Number 4 is your GPU. Again, these are still really easy to upgrade. There are some limitations, and you do need to be careful about making sure you have enough power in your power supply to handle a graphics card. But in terms of compatibility, most of the streamlined graphics cards that are out on the market right now, even ones from a couple of years ago, are going to work with the computer you have. It's mainly just the power supply, which again is another easy upgrade if you absolutely need to. But if you already have a graphics card in your computer within the last 5 years or so, at least, you should be able to buy pretty much any graphics card on the market and be fine. So if your graphics card is, again, if that's your bottleneck, if you're hitting the high 80s, low 90s, even high 90s, 100% on your graphics card usage, maybe that's what you look at for upgrading. The market isn't super great right now because of the whole pandemic thing, and parts are just harder to get, especially if parts from China. But I will leave some links in the description down below for some pretty good graphics cards to get, and at least at the time of recording, editing, and publishing, the graphics cards aren't completely sold out and aren't being scalped super high. So check those out. Again, just a disclaimer, that could change within the next couple weeks, months, whatever. If you watch this in a year or two, these ones that I link aren't going to be the best thing you can look for, but at least as of right now, we'll leave some in the description so you can take a look and pick out one of those if you need to upgrade your graphics card. Okay, so let's say you open Task Manager, your RAM's doing fine, your graphics card's doing fine, but your CPU is causing problems. Now this is number 5 on our list of things you should be upgrading and when to upgrade them. I would kind of put this towards the end of the list because, one, it's harder to upgrade than, let's say, adding an SSD, adding RAM, adding a graphics card. A lot of those things, there's not a lot of compatibility issues. The RAM, you have to have a specific type and a specific speed that your motherboard supports, so it's a little confusing. However, as long as you buy the one that you have and there's room on your motherboard, you can add RAM, so it's not a big deal. Graphics cards, like I said, are pretty universally compatible as long as you have the power for them. SSDs, obviously, as long as there's an open SATA port, you've got room for it. And if you're replacing your main hard drive, there's already room for it, so it's not a big deal. The problem with CPUs is that they're very, very specific to the type of motherboard and the architecture that the motherboard uses. That being said though, recently, in the last couple of years with the rise in CPUs, AMD has made it very easy to upgrade, at least within the last couple of generations of AMD Ryzen CPUs. A lot of the Ryzen CPUs are future-proofed in that the architecture that it uses and the architecture the motherboard uses are compatible with the architecture of the newer Ryzen chips. So let's say you have a Ryzen CPU and that's your bottleneck right now. Maybe it's a Ryzen 3, it's just not as powerful as you would like, it's causing stuttering issues, it is your bottleneck on your CPU, and you do want to upgrade and fix that. At least as of right now, with the Ryzen CPUs that are coming out and that have been released in the last couple of years, you have a ton of options, assuming it's using that B450 motherboard architecture and the AM4 socket. You can use pretty much all of the Ryzen CPUs. So I'll leave some links in the description down below just to figure out kind of what your options are. But you can upgrade to like the Ryzen 5 or the Ryzen 7, even go from like the second generation to the third generation Ryzens almost seamlessly. So while you might run into some BIOS issues with your motherboard, that's something you can take care of beforehand. So as long as you know what you're planning on doing, you can check compatibility and all that fun stuff. So again, I'll leave links in the description down below just to check compatibility. Ryzen especially is very easy to upgrade, at least much easier to upgrade than Intel CPUs, but that doesn't mean you can't upgrade with your Intel CPU. And here's the thing, at the end of the day, if you need to upgrade your CPU or you want to upgrade your CPU and you don't have another CPU that's compatible with your motherboard, you can just buy another motherboard. Motherboards aren't that expensive comparatively to like higher end CPUs. So adding like, let's say an extra $100, $150 on top of your CPU might be what you have to do. And that kind of gray area in terms of compatibility and just kind of figuring out what you need and what's compatible. That's why this is kind of at the bottom of the list. However, you should still look into upgrading your CPU at some point. Now, the components we didn't talk about in your PC, let's say like your case, your power supply, again, motherboard, these are things that you don't necessarily need to upgrade. The case is just an aesthetic thing for the most part. If there's cooling issues, then yeah, you do need to change that. Power supply, again, you really only need to upgrade it if you get components that require higher wattage. So my recommendation is, if all this seems very confusing and you're not sure what kind of wattage you need for a new graphics card or whether the CPUs can be compatible, what I would suggest is, I'll leave this link in the description down below too, is go to PCPartPicker.com. I want you to basically build your PC out of the parts on there, and it'll tell you what the recommended wattage is. It'll tell you if the parts are compatible. If you select what motherboard you have, which if you bought a pre-built, it might be hard to figure out, but you just look up the model of your computer and it should tell you. Or it should have come with like an instruction manual that says like, oh, this is a B450M motherboard. Add it to the list on PC Part Picker, and it will show you what is compatible with that computer and with that configuration. That's gonna be the easiest way to do it. If you are confused about what's compatible or you're not really even sure what you have, that's gonna be the easiest way to do it. So that's what I would do if you're just having some questions about this. Again, if you also have questions, just leave a comment down below. I'll try to respond to everything if I can, and if not, I'll leave links to help you figure out what you need to in a reply to your comment. So that's really all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this kind of guided you at least to figure out what you need to upgrade in terms of your actual computer. Again, peripherals and stuff, case, it's really that stuff's up to you. But in terms of the actual components of your computer, that's the order I would do it. Again, we'll lay it out one more time. We do SSD, Windows activation key, RAM, graphics card, and CPU. So thank you guys for watching this video. I'm Cameo, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.